This is a big one for the Jaguar. For a while, Alien vs. Predator was cited as the single reason anyone would want to own an Atari Jaguar. It was the game to have. Now, decades have passed since then, and quite a bit of the shine has come off of Aliens vs. Predator. I think that's due to it losing its historic context. At the time Alien vs. Predator was released, it was one of the most advanced, detailed, complicated, and engaging first-person shooters out there. In some ways, it was a harbinger of things to come, and its rough edges mainly come from being among the first people to try something like it. But before I get to the Jaguar game, I need to back up a little bit, because Alien vs. Predator has a weird history. Once upon a time, there was the film Alien, and people really liked it. Eventually, they made a sequel, Aliens, and people also liked that. Liked it so much that we are still living with its influence on media. And the same movie studio made another action film featuring an alien monster, this one called Predator. So you had one very influential action film all about swarms of alien bug monsters, and one very influential action film about a single alien monster who happened to be a big game hunter. This being the 1980s, movie executives didn't see any value in film franchises or shared universes. And comic books were extra worthless. So if some microscopically small independent comic book company, a real dark horse as it were, wanted to get the license to make comics based on aliens and comics based on Predator, why not let them have it? Well, now that company Dark Horse had both the Alien and the Predator license, and there's nothing comic book people love more than a crossover. That first Aliens vs. Predator comic was one of the initial big hits for Dark Horse. And it got nerds talking. When are the aliens and predators gonna meet on screen and fight? Well, for that, a set designer for Predator 2 mounted the head of one of those aliens onto the wall of the Predator's ship. And that triggered a decade and a half of fan rumors. As the studio struggled to make a film featuring both of the iconic monsters, they'd licensed the movies out for video game adaptations. And then the movie didn't get made, but the video games did. A pretty bad Super Nintendo beat-em-up was the first Alien vs. Predator game to show up, and about a year after that, Capcom released a very good Alien vs. Predator beat-em-up to arcades. And finally, after all of that, the Jaguar's Alien vs. Predator reached store shelves in October of 1994. Alien vs. Predator was developed by Rebellion Developments, a name you might be familiar with since they are still around and still making games. Rebellion would go on to make such games as Aliens vs. Predator, Aliens vs. Predator, the Sniper Elite series, and of course, Aliens vs. Predator. The concept behind the Jaguar Aliens vs. Predator game is that there was a mysterious incident on a space station where the Marines on board allowed two different alien crafts to dock, and it turned out one of those crafts contained a Predator, and you won't believe what the other craft had inside it. The game is themed as a training simulation based on those events, and that is why you can choose to experience things as a Marine, as an alien, or as a Predator. Okay, I know that the Predator is an alien, but the licensed media hadn't really latched on to xenomorph as the term for the aliens yet, so they're just aliens in this game. Having three radically different methods of playing the game was something totally unique for Alien vs. Predator. A real nobody had done anything like this before kind of situation. And to really give you full context on why Alien vs. Predator was so impressive, I think it helps to look at what the first-person shooter genre was like in 1994. Yes, Doom was already out, and System Shock was released a month before Alien vs. Predator, but those two games were on the cutting edge. Alien vs. Predator lacked both the dynamic action of Doom and the complete immersion of System Shock. But it'd be unfair to just hold Alien vs. Predator to those standards, since to this day video games struggle to reach those levels. Really, a better comparison is something like Blake Stone, a game built on the Wolfenstein 3D engine, but experimenting by adding a lot of interactive elements. In 1994, Blake Stone is something I would call solidly above average for a first-person shooter. This is what Aliens vs. Predator was competing against. And right from the very start, you can see what a huge step up in visual design it was. Yes, that HUD takes up a huge portion of the screen, but it's also not really blocking your view of what's happening. Also, the numbers on the HUD tell you which numbers on the gamepad to push to activate that feature. For the Marine and Alien, it's not that important, but for the Predator, who has more special abilities than any other character, it's helpful to have those reminders right there. There's an auto map that you can bring up by pressing button 8, and it overlays the center of the screen while still keeping things visible. And it rotates appropriately so that you can stay oriented. That is a feature that Doom had, but not many other first-person shooters at this point. You have the ability to freely explore the space station and travel back and forth between different regions. The placement of enemies is randomized. Just because there's a Marine there doesn't mean that if you try again, there'll still be a Marine there. And that's an important point about Alien vs. Predator. It is not intended as a game where you play once, check out the narrative, and then you're done. It's more of an arcade-style experience. It's a playground of destruction. Once you know what you're doing, it only takes about an hour to complete each character's mission. And that's without really rushing anything. It's pretty clear that the intention is that you play over and over again, trying to score better. You can save your progress. You do that by pausing and then hitting the options button, but reloading a save game respawns all of the enemies in the area. What you're saving is your position, score, and weapons. Like I said, this is very much intended as an arcade-style experience. Between the three characters, there are a handful of common controls. Pressing and holding button C allows you to strafe. You can also do this with buttons 7 and 9 on the keypad. Button B is always an attack, and button A always interacts with objects like doors. The map is always activated by pushing button 8 on the keypad. As for everything else, well, each character is radically different. Let's start with the Marine. He begins with getting let out of the brig. He was locked up for punching a superior officer, and you're given a shotgun immediately. The Marine's goal is to escape the space station, but to do this, he needs to find key cards that will let him access different areas of the station, gather more useful weapons like a pulse rifle, smart gun, and flamethrower, and avoid getting overwhelmed by the alien hordes. Plus, not get hunted to extinction by the Predator. The Marine needs to scavenge things off of all of the dead bodies that you'll find lying around. Generally, if you see a soldier, it'll have ammunition, and if you see somebody in a coat, it'll have a health kit. The Marine can also interact with the computer terminals found around the station, and these can help give you some guidance on where you should go next. The Marine can use the elevators to get around the 5 floors of the station pretty easily. Of course, the ones where the alien ships are docked are the most dangerous. The Marine's mission is the most like a standard first-person shooter. Run around, shoot things, get keycards, get big guns, and that's pretty much all you need to know. You switch the weapons after you collect them by pressing buttons 1 to 4 on the keypad, and it really is just that simple for them. Now the Predator steps up the complexity quite a bit. The Predator's upgrades are all locked behind their honor score. The story given to you is that you're a young hunter in training, and this station is for your rite of passage. The Predator starts with only wrist blades, just a melee weapon, and you get 5,000 points every time you kill a Marine with them. You have to get 150,000 points before you're allowed to use the staff, 350,000 points before you can shoot death frisbees. Okay, they're razor discs, but they're death frisbees. And finally, 750,000 points before you're allowed to use the shoulder-mounted laser cannons. The general way that the honor points are structured, you get more of them for killing with melee weapons, You get more of them for killing full-grown aliens, and you can lose them by using invisibility. The Predator can cloak by pressing the Option button, and killing anything while you're cloaked causes you to lose honor points. If you drop below a threshold where you can use a weapon, then you lose the weapon. So the strategy, at least in the early game, becomes wander around cloaked, get kinda close to a Marine that's off by themselves, uncloak, and stab them. As soon as you uncloak, they'll know that you're there. Enemies in this game can always detect you if there's nothing between you and them, and so they'll probably get a couple of hits off before you manage to kill them. Fortunately, the Predator carries around his own healing pack, and you use up energy from that by pressing and holding 5 on the number pad. You can rebuild that energy bar by collecting medkits in the same way that the Marine can. You also have different vision modes while you're cloaked, and you cycle through these by pushing number 6. I didn't find any of them to be especially helpful though. Naturally, the Predator's goal is to hunt and kill the alien queen. You'll have to explore the station searching for it. Then there are the aliens. And the aliens are probably the most complicated ones to use. You wouldn't think that, because they can only do 3 things, but the gimmick here is that you are not playing as an alien. Instead, you're playing as the Hive. The Hive senses that the Queen is in distress and wants to reunite with it. That's the goal. At the start, there is one sole alien, and an alien by itself is incredibly weak. You'll probably be able to get through 1 or 2 Marines, but then someone will blast you with a flamethrower, or you'll get chewed up by that pulse rifle, and then you're down. The alien has 3 attacks available to it, all of which are there right from the start, and all of which are bound to buttons A, B, and C. Button C is still used for strafing, and button A is still used to activate things, but C also does a tail whip attack, and A claws at things. Button B does a jaw snap, and that is a very powerful attack that kills any Marine with 1 shot. But you don't want to use the jaw snap unless you have to. You need those Marines alive. Marines are how you get more aliens. Now this is the most confusing and inconsistent mechanic in the game. You need to attack the Marines by alternating claw and tail swipe. It's supposed to be claw swipe claw, but I've seen this activate the other way around as well. Now if you did just enough damage to incapacitate but not kill the Marine, then you are told to cocoon the enemy. To do that, you need to stand next to them for about 5 seconds. But while you're doing that, they are still dying, and there's a significant chance that they'll die before you finish cocooning them. If everything goes just right, then you'll get a message that says cocoon complete, and you'll see a Marine kinda bundled up there. This adds an icon to the left-hand side of your screen that shows the growth of the embryo in that Marine. The progression from single-celled to alien warrior takes about 90 seconds. Fast for a sci-fi movie, but kinda slow for a video game. When the alien that you're controlling dies, you immediately respawn at the most recent full-grown alien warrior. If you die before it matures, then it doesn't count. At the start of the game, your priority really has to be to get some people cocooned. If you encounter multiple enemies, then you need to bite their heads off and hopefully cocoon the last one. Once you've got some cocoons going, then you need to avoid combat until they're grown. The aliens don't have any way to recover health, so building up a stock of extra lives is vital. The aliens might be able to use doors and figure out how to operate airlocks, but they struggle with the concept of elevators. To get around the station, they have to travel through the air vents. The Marine and Predator can also travel in the vents, but they generally don't want to because they're filled with aliens. So there you have it, 3 different characters, 3 very different ways to play the game. Of the 3, I find the alien to be the hardest one to play as. You have to be slow and cautious to start with, and random enemy placement can just get you. The Predator, though, is my least favorite to play as, mainly because you'll be running around cloaked and then coming out to stab people for about 20 minutes before you can do anything else. And as for the Marine, why are you playing Alien vs. Predator if you want to play as a Space Marine? Playing Alien vs. Predator from a vantage point over 30 years later, you can kind of see why the game has lost its luster. It has all of the rough edges of those early years of first-person shooters when people were figuring out how to do the most basic things. This is still the era of experimentation, and Alien vs. Predator was a big experiment. I feel like in terms of Jaguar exclusives, this is the most ambitious game on the console. Rebellion was swinging for the fences here. And even in the things that don't quite work, like most of the Predator playstyle and the slow buildup of the Alien, you can see the promise of what they were attempting. Fortunately, Rebellion got a chance to iterate on their ideas. Every time they made a new Aliens vs. Predator game, they built on the foundation that they laid out here. Alien vs. Predator on the Jaguar might not be the most thrilling implementation of these ideas, but in 1994, this was a game on the cutting edge of first-person shooter design. And that's something that makes it stand out in the Jaguar's library.